worry about that. I think it's just what we learned from the case. Okay. We know for almost 2 years now, we've been dealing with modified software. Originally, I'm going to go over this too. Originally, we were doing what they call data check fails. Vehicles were failing for data check for a number of reasons. Then in July of 22, I think it was, BAR decided that they were going to go split it out into modified software. Now, I always say this about the modified software. You may not see a lot of them, but the point being is, if you do, you need to understand it, the purpose of doing this and why it's happening. But understand, unless you took your HP tuner or some other system like that and modified the vehicle yourself, you're not responsible for it. But you have to explain it to the consumer, who may or may not know about the vehicle. They probably do, but if they don't, they may have bought a vehicle, and then what their course of action would be. So if we're gonna focus on the global side, and it can be found on the OE side too, don't get me wrong, but we're going to go into what I call mode 9 in global OBD2. We know the Cal ID is going to be there. That's going to be the software version, the part number for that particular system. The key, we've talked about this in the little past, and I still have a video on my website on my YouTube channel on CVNs, and I'm blown away that that's the one that keeps going up every day. So people must be interested in learning more about this, or they're seeing something, because in the last couple of months, it's gone up over 400 on that. And I know it's probably mostly California guys, but calibration verification number, there's a couple of you that may go back to the bar 84. I don't know, does anybody in this group go back to bar 84, or am I the only one? Okay, I'm the only one. We used to have the machine fail and it would say checksum error. Well, this is the checksum to make sure somebody has not modified the software. I told my students and some of you years ago that this would be the next level of defense when it comes to failing vehicles. Well, with the state's database getting bigger and bigger and bigger, with so many of the same vehicles, they're able to pull this stuff together. And basically, it's to verify the integrity of the software, that nobody has tampered with it, because tampering with that software is an emissions tamper, subject to a $2,500 fine is under federal laws. And basically, when you modify it, you're changing the bits in there, and that changes the CVN. The hard part about this is, and makes this difficult, is most manufacturers don't publish this. And I'm not asking you to be an expert on this. I'm just making sure that you understand it. And if you're not in the global side, you should be able to find it on the OE side, but the global side is the quickest, easiest way to find it. So what is BAR using when they're looking at this? All this information. First of all, when they're checking these vehicles, and I just got off the phone call from a guy who runs a training program down south, and he's not far from that shop, the training center that was using that got basically arrested on the federal level for using that programmer. And he said the same thing. It's like he only has to deal with a couple schools down there and a couple places that are training this stuff, but there's still fraud going on. So the idea is, when they're dealing with what we call modified and directed vehicles, one, they're looking at the DAD, and they're looking at what voltage is coming out of pin 16, because some of the simulators don't do the actual voltage. They're also looking at PID counts. And I'll show you examples that go away. But BAR finally told us what they were collecting in actual smog inspection information. So every time you hook up to the DAD, what are they collecting? And I'm sure, I don't know if all this is going through BAR 97, but I suspect it is. So if we go to, and notice the word I use. I didn't use the word modes. I'm getting you ready for the next lesson that we'll do tomorrow morning. Service is really the term they're going to be using, but we know them as modes. So mode 1 are all your data PIDs, okay? And your readiness flags. And remember, we call them readiness flags, not monitors, because monitor tests make up flags. They collect all that. They look at the same vehicle and know that the same vehicle, same engine calibration should have the same amount of PIDs reporting. If they don't, that's one of the red flags. Service mode 2, we used to call what we call freeze frame. That is not collected. They don't collect anything to do with the freeze frame. Service mode 3, which was our current and history DTCs, those are all collected. Service mode 4, there's nothing to collect there. That's, do you want to clear the system or not? Service mode 5, um, the is the O2 sensor results. That went away with CAN. There's no point in collecting that. It's basically invalid data in most cases, and in some cases, it's good data. You know, so you want to be aware of that. Mode 6, mids and tids. That's all collected. Again, all this is being collected as you know when Star came out with same make, model, year, transmission, engine, da 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 da. Well, this is how they're comparing those vehicles. Pending codes are collected, even though they're not being used to fail a vehicle. They are being collected by the state. Now, one word of caution on this: if you ever have a situation where vehicles come in, and I don't know if any of you had this, where when you smogged it, not long after it went out the door, the check engine light came on. Customer's back. Hey, my car didn't have a check engine light on before you smogged it. Hey, you didn't do anything wrong. The machine smogged it, passed it. If you ever got a complaint on that, I would say to BAR, hey, could you do me a favor on this vehicle? Could you check your database to see if there were any pending codes in there when the car was inspected? That would explain why that might have come on a second trip when the vehicle left. Not saying it's going to happen, but something you could find in this information could be beneficial to you. Mode 8, not going to happen. That's your, and it's not bidirectional. That's your control of the evap vent solenoid. Nothing there. Mode 9, that is the gold mine for BAR. That's our CBN, that's our Cal ID, and that's our in-use monitor performance tracking ratios that we are using, and BAR is using, CARB's using, to determine what monitor tests are running with what frequency. And this is for both gasoline and diesel. If you remember in the last, probably within the last year and a half, they changed the monitors for diesel. And one of the reasons they did it is they used the in-use monitor performance tracking ratios to determine that these vehicles were running their monitor test in these areas often enough that we should be holding the cars accountable to it. And that's created a couple of problems. Example, Ford on some of the diesels where they had a reflash, the vehicles were passing for years and years and years. Then this reflash was put in the vehicles as an update. And in reality, it actually made the NOx sensors harder to run. And in their follow-up tests, they weren't running. So now Ford's released another reflash for that to hopefully improve that. And then the last one they collect, obviously, is all the permanent DTCs. So when you're hooking up to the machine now, you should be able to start visualizing what's going through there to the DAD that vehicle is transporting. And that's that ring of people I was telling you that got arrested. They were collecting all this information, putting it in their system, so they made sure that all this vehicle got passed on from a similar vehicle than what they had. And I guess they had a way to write in the VIN to make it look like the same vehicle. So pretty sophisticated. Okay. When they go to court cases, and I've seen a couple of them, some of the things they use, obviously, they compare VINs, they compare protocols, PID counts by the ECM, and I should say /TCM, because there are cases where the TCM also reports some emission PIDs. Readiness flags /monitors. I always say that because I want everybody, and I think all you went through almost all of you went through the class with me. And Chad, did you take one of my workshops on this topic?
I might have at a CAD conference, but I didn't in
Yeah,
the
I
other
did
one.
it in the last year and a half. You probably, if
Yeah,
you're,
yeah, yeah, I
you
did.
probably did. I'm trying to get everybody off the word monitors. The monitor is what you're calling me, telling me you can't get the monitors to run. It's the flag you can't get to flip, and it's what monitor test didn't run to make the flag flip. Not that BAR's looking at it that way, but they're collecting that obviously. Mainly, what are they looking at? Is it supported, not supported? Did someone flip the bit? Other factors to be introduced. Again, it's like the STAR program. Compare like vehicles. Compare similar results from the same vehicle. And if there's the key to this whole thing is if they detect any fraud, they're going to head them off to the referee. Simple as that. Let the referee decide. They did release this information about what they're seeing in tampered vehicles. It was early on, still waiting for an update, but this is what they released. You can see it was as expected. Diesels were quite heavy in percentage. The older vehicles, 1.5, that's not a lot, but it's enough that, hey, if 1% of your vehicles are a headache with a customer, that customer takes up a lot more than 1% of your time. Here's some examples of vehicles you might run into out there. When the chances of running into tampered software in those years, and I would be willing to bet some of these go beyond those years. Does anybody do a lot of work on Subarus? Nobody does. Okay. Nobody's doing cam timing or any chain replacements on those. Okay. Well, a lot of the Subarus are modified, and the dealer handles it two ways. I have one dealer that, hey, if they're tampered, they'll reprogram them. I have other dealership that says, hey, if you tampered it, you buy it. I had a quote recently from a shop that I pointed him in the right direction. He says, well, I had to quote this guy on the Subaru $2,200 to put his vehicle back into running order because what he had removed and what had to be reprogrammed and the parts that he didn't keep when he redid it, when he modified it. So it gets into some big bucks. But you can get an idea here of what the chances are of running into a tampered vehicle. If you look down this list, I'm sure some of you wouldn't be surprised at what you're seeing. I was a little surprised at the smart car. I was wondering if they were just trying to get more horsepower out of it or what they were trying to do. The Mustangs didn't surprise me. I'm going to show you one later on a modified software on a CVN. It's not real clear, but from a shop who actually reprograms in New York and showed me the CVN before and after and how it was modified. But then look at the vehicles that aren't tampered. Almost nothing. Okay, so this is to give you an idea of what they have to deal with. Your chance, or anybody out there who's dealt with modified software?
Lots of them on diesels.
Yeah, absolutely. Squeeze everything you can out of those things. And and you saw in their percentages, even those early years, 3.7. And I'm sure if you add that into even later years, it's still going on. You hear them, you go down the road, you know. Now, here's some of the things that I've taught in the past that we used to say that the CVN and the Cal ID were unique. So one part number for 1 million cars would have the same CVN. Well, then they run into some problems. Mainly this has been with Fords. This is where some of the issues are. You can see right here, we have the same Cal ID on the left here. Same vehicle on the left. Everything is good. Same computer. But notice in this case, this one had this many CVNs, different ones. 191 for this one. 59 for this one. 26 for this one, and 1. So somewhere Ford, however they did their algorithm on these vehicles, was not consistent. This is not the norm. I would say to you still in probably 98% of the cases, the Cal ID and the CVN bark and bank on and know that this one will be the same throughout the whole group. But it does happen. Now we have the opposite case. Again, this was Ford. We have all these different controllers using the same CVN. Okay, again, that's not your responsibility, but these are the anomalies that they have to deal with, where some vehicles may be pushed through and others may not. But when you hear, again, that CVN and Cal ID should be the same for that same part number, should have that same CVN regardless, there's a couple percentage out there that make it not true. Okay, the other thing we have is we do have, and if you're looking up EO numbers and you're looking at modifications, there are software packages that have been certified by CARB. So again, this is what BAR has to do. All you're doing is inspecting this vehicle as received. Everybody agree? You're not modifying it. If you haven't modified it, you're just inspecting it as received. But in the end, when that vehicle fails, it's not BAR, it's not the referee that's initially got to do with the consumer. It's you. So you need to be educated enough on this to at least explain to them what may have happened. Now, I apologize for this, but this is what he sent me from New York. I'll blow it up a little bit. It's not I'll tell you what, if you can't see it. Just notice that this is the OEM Ford, and there's an FP right here on these Fords right here. I think it's an FP or an FF. This is the original software. You come down here and you look at the modified software. There's an E5, there's an A5. Well, this is the kind of stuff that BAR would be looking at if they have enough vehicles in their database that have this, not the VIN, because obviously that would be unique, but the Cal ID and the CVN. In most cases, 99% of the cases, these should be consistent throughout the fleet that use this part number, this CVN. When someone modifies it, then they catch in the database and they have to verify in the database. Who knows? Maybe this was an approved one. But they've got to flag this out, and they call it data mining to find out why this number is different. Okay, so this is what they have to deal with when it comes to software. Okay, if you run in this situation and customer's really hot about it and they don't know anything about it, they can go ahead and they can make an appointment with the referee. The referee will be the end user or end person to decide on this as to whether this is valid or not valid. They can file a complaint with BAR and get it out of your hands. So you should be aware of the process if you run into one of these. Ken, what did you have to do on those diesels?
I believe we had to send them to the referee, but I mean, like you say, when they come in,
Yeah.
I give them a heads up that, dude, it's not going to pass. You need to go find everything you took off, put it back on it.
Yeah.
And and a lot of times you can't. If you go and try and beforehand, a lot of them have a lockout and they don't even have the tool that they tuned it with or deleted it with, and I can't get in and reflash. Like a Ford, Chevy, Dodge, I have all OEM scan tools to reflash, and a lot of times I can't get in and put them back once they put the parts on there because it's locked.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's
So
a headache.
have you had any customers come in that way and they were totally oblivious to it? They didn't know?
Not really. I mean,
They knew. Yeah.
up here they know. I mean, we're rural a lot. I mean, more diesel than gas.
Oh yeah. Well, that's why if you go back and look at this list, I mean, come on, you've seen these on the streets. You got AMGs out there, have probably been messed around. You look at the vehicles, not surprising, except down here, like I said, the smart car was a little surprising. But a GTR, a Shelby, this one right here was off of a Shelby that they cranked the horsepower up to this thing on a dyno. I had the video somewhere. They cranked this thing up to, I forgot how many horsepower after making their modifications. So it's real out there. This was from the state of New York. Again, if it went in for inspection, it would fail, but I'm sure there's some way they have around it. So just a reminder, what I'm saying to you is you gotta face up to customer. You got to deal with them one-on-one. Be educated about enough to say, hey, this is what may have happened. Or you can probably, like Ken said, you can look right at them and you can see the vehicle and know that they're aware of it. But don't take the brunt of it, but you are the first line of defense against that failure when they try and play dumb. So just be educated on it.